Between the ongoing pandemic, the blistering cold, and an ongoing siege of my city from people with a fundamental misunderstanding of politics and healthcare, I haven't been going out much lately. So I was super happy to get a little something in the mail recently from the company Shield Wolf Miniatures, who are also sponsoring this video. These are a couple of sprues from their kits, and a sample of stuff from their newest Kickstarter that should be going on right now, depending on when you're watching this. So right off the bat, these aren't the kind of miniatures I tend to go in on. Their style is a lot more cartoony and fantastical than I usually like, but that doesn't mean there's not a lot I like in these kits, as sometimes the best stuff comes from where we least expect it. So don't worry all of you Lord of the Rings folks, as we're going to be putting these to use later. And so let's take a quick once over of what we got here. Paint up a model, and then look at all the ways we can put these kits to use in my day-to-day kit bashing. So first of all, let's take a look at these goblins. Now I believe these are from the currently available kits from their Forest Goblin line. Each sprue has a couple of bodies with a variety of heads and a ton of weapon options. They go together nicely and easily, and while there was a bit more mold flash on these than I tend to like, the plastic quality is easily on par with companies like Games Workshop. The style is very classic pulp fantasy goblin, and would fit into any modern Age of Sigmar Grot army, or hop right into a classical fantasy goblin army. Some of my favorite bits on here are the little details like the goofy headdresses and goggles, along with the rough-hewn weapons. For me, I do wish there was a little bit more variety in the poses, particularly for the archers, but I think these are meant to be more for rank and flank style games, as I'm sure they'd all line up nicely. Though they did come with round bases, but we'll talk about those later. The second set was the one I was particularly interested in, as I've actually seen these models before. These are mostly the shield maidens that are also currently in production, and while they're a lot more warrior lady than I tend to like, with their midriffs out and full breastplates, but I do like the look of the armor and particularly the heads. However, this isn't just a standard kit, as I believe for this Kickstarter they're introducing some new elements in the form of these Valkyrie bits with wings and fancier helmets. I'm not sure if these are the final product copies or if there may be more changes down the line, as I definitely noticed a bit of a difference with the material here, as I found it felt a little bit gummier, and the mold flash was definitely worse, particularly around stuff like the wings. In the end, I was lazy and didn't bother getting much of these off the model I built, but you can't really tell in the final paint job. And that leads into another interesting but very nerdy thing with these, as rather than having a couple of unique sprues mixed together, for these the sprues themselves are mixed up, with stuff like the same bodies existing on all of them, while the other items vary. And so I'm now just curious about efficiency, as I know steel molds are expensive, and I would think having variations of the same sprue rather than just completely different sprues for accessories or command squads like a lot of companies do, would be more expensive, but honestly, I don't know, so if anyone does, let me know. Like the goblins, these guys went together very simply, though I did find the heads a little finicky to get on right. And as for the Valkyrie versus Shield Maiden thing, it's just the backplate that's different, as the rest of the models go together the same way. They also included some flight stands, but there's no obvious place to attach them, and all the feet are modeled in walking poses, so I'm not really sure what's going on here. And with a few of these builds, I really do like how they look, though one thing I like a lot more than I normally would is these bases. At first I thought they were pretty standard 25 and 30mm bases, but they have this weird structure on the bottom, which at first I didn't understand. But as I figured it out, I started to get really impressed. First of all, there is this groove down the middle, and the plastic on top of it is thinner than the rest of the base, which makes it, while finicky, easy enough to cut out, leaving you with the perfect size for the tabs that come on a lot of models, which is awesome. One of the biggest pains I find is having to have both slotted and not slotted bases to accommodate all the different figures I use, and this, while not seamless, fixes that really nicely. Also, there's this little circle here which, once again, I didn't understand at first. But magnets. Duh. This is fantastic, as I love having magnets on my bases, but almost never do it as it's just too fiddly. So with both of these, I'm seriously interested in getting a lot more of these bases as my main backup, and will definitely be checking to see if they are sold separately. But that's not enough, as we do need to get some paint on at least one of these, and of course, I had to go with the Valkyrie. As soon as I saw these, I pictured an awesome Viking god with wings and a spear on top of a mountain. So I built up a base and started painting her up. The paint job was pretty basic, so there's not a lot to show there, but when it came to the wings, I wasn't sure where to go. There's so many awesome birds out there, so I collected pictures of a few I thought might look nice and put it to a vote over on my Patreon Facebook group. Speaking of which, I have to give a big shout out to our newest members, including Steve Angelo, Kevin, Dan, Mike, Chris, and Max. It's amazing to have you, and your support just means the world to me. So if you've ever thought about signing up and wanted to get your hands on some of those lovely custom dice, hop on over and take a look, as only the first 25 are getting them. While the founding members do get that little bonus, I'm not really doing any other tiers over there, as I don't like the idea of splitting the community based purely on money, as even just $1 a month is amazing and the equivalent of watching a video over 300 times. But if you aren't up for it, that's totally fine. And I'm just happy to have you all here to chat about this hobby we all love. But anyways, back to the model. So the guys over on Patreon picked the snowy owl and I went to it, before realizing I have no idea how to paint feathers. So while I do like how they turned out well enough, they are a lot darker than I would want. However, that darkness does help, as I tried to keep everything, particularly the base, dark, as I wanted to add some snow. And that always looks best when contrasted to dark colors. For the snow, I mixed up golden light modeling paste with some snow flock and these fine, decorative white stones I found at the dollar store. After slapping that on the areas that looked like they would get all snowy, we were good to go. While it's not perfect, I'm pretty happy with how it turned out, and it was fun painting something with no expectation of using it in any games or armies. Some of the bits here are a bit fiddly to paint, like the slightly soft details of the wings and the face, which was really tightly closed in by the helmet. But otherwise, I think she looks awesome. As I mentioned at the beginning, these guys aren't really my normal thing, so how do they fare when it comes to kitbashing? Well, at first glance, not much, as the scale is wildly different than a lot of models I like working on that are a bit more in the realistic 28mm scale. But if we look a bit closer, there's a lot here that actually works great. Firstly, the weapons and shields are an obvious thing, particularly the weapons on the shield maidens and the shields of the goblins, as they fit beautifully when mixed into some of my favorite subjects, hordes of orcs. But there's a lot of other stuff here too, as due to the proportions on the Valkyries, the individual bits work really nicely even on smaller scaled models. For instance, I threw a shield maiden head onto this peri-miniature body to get a sweet Joan of Arc looking lady. And I really think the wings on some of those new Stormcasts would make some awesome prosecutors that would fit in better with the more modern style of the Stormcast as opposed to those original ones. Even little stuff is useful, like these spikes on the side of the goblin's banners, as they look great when stuck onto his helmet for a particularly easternly Nazgul I'm fiddling with. So what should we take away from all this? Well, the main thing is just to break ourselves out of that big old box we built, as when we start looking at stuff outside of the norm, there's tons of potential out there to keep making our models even more awesome and unique. If you're particularly interested in these ones here, I'd recommend taking a look over at Shieldwolf Miniatures. And a big thank you to you guys for sponsoring this video. I know I'm just a little channel at the end of the day, so this was an awesome opportunity to be included in. And if any other companies are interested in me taking a look at their stuff, I'm always up for it. And actually have a mailbox just for that, so yeah, feel free. But thanks again to all of you for watching, and I hope you all take some fun tips and ideas out of this. And we'll maybe spend some more time in the sections you wouldn't normally look at next time you're at your local game store. So, as always, stay safe everyone, and see you all again soon.